what does the community affected by that issue think? Is there an organization, locally, regionally, nationally, of affected people? Like, let's say you're working on an issue of DACA, like Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and you say, okay, well, we want to expand, protect, change something about the system to instill more rights, to protect more individuals. The first thing you might want to do is find, and here in Boston, I gave the example because there's an organization called the Student Immigration Movement here, which is staffed by, run by an organization of undocumented, young, mostly students who are kind of just finished high school, going into college, or haven't been able to go to college because of their status or their lack of status. And so having a conversation with those people and saying, what are the things that you want? Actually, I give that example because I saw a conversation with some of those folks, and they were like, the most important issue for us is licenses. And some people were like, yeah, but we think this other issue is more important. And they were like, no, the most important issue that affects us day to day is our ability to have driver's licenses. Because one, we can't get places, or we have to break the law. And when we break the law, we're stopped, we're pulled over, and that exposes us to the criminal system and the immigration deportation system. That's the most important issue for us. And I saw people struggle with this. They were like, no, we think this other issue is more important. We want to fight this other issue, right? That we think is a sexier issue, that is maybe a bigger issue, that maybe someone has a good legal challenge for. But they said, no, this is the issue that we would like to address. This is the issue that we want you to address. And sometimes that can be frustrating, because you can say, no, but I had a really good argument in federal court of why, the President of the United States can't change the situation with people with DACA status. And maybe that is the case. But movement lawyering would argue for trying to do the other. Also, maybe your organization doesn't do that. You're like, well, we don't actually work on administrative or state level issues of access to driver's licenses for undocumented people. So sometimes that can be difficult. And people say, I want to do this. Like, I want to sue the police, or I want to sue a prosecutor, I want to sue a judge. And our answer is always, because everyone on this phone call would say that, be like, you can't do that. You cannot do that. And I think one of the things we need to put in our minds, and I would say this is a tenet of movement lawyering also, is instead of saying no, saying, if the thing that you wanted was possible to do, what would it look like? How would we do it, right? And what parts of the system would have to change for that to happen? And I think that's the thing that we should always think, like, if it were possible, what would be the things that we would have to change? And how difficult would that be, right? Because right now, as I said before, it's one of the ripest times to change these things. And the example that I give in this is when Clarence Earl Gideon, from the case Gideon versus Wainwright, which created the public defender system as we know it, the public defender system in the United States, when he was in court for this, minor burglary, it's a felony, but minor criminal act, he said, "Oh, I should be able to have a lawyer." And at the time, the court said, "That's not what the Constitution says. You don't get a lawyer." And he said, "No. I read the Constitution. I'm supposed to have a lawyer." And everyone involved, the court, probably the court clerk, the lawyers who were there, the prosecutor, they're like, "No, you're wrong." All of the people said, "No, you're wrong." And while, Mr. Gideon at the time wasn't a movement person, he had an idea. And he said, all of you people are wrong. This system is unfair. Everyone else here has a law degree, right? The judge does, maybe the clerk does, and the prosecutor does. I'm standing here with nothing, and you're about to lock me up for this. It is not a fair system that I don't have someone representing me. And everyone said, "You're absolutely wrong." For years, right? He was in prison, and they said, "You're still wrong." And they said, "See, we convicted you. You're definitely wrong." And he said, I don't care. And he took one of those little golf pencils, and he wrote a writ for certiorari, eventually got a lawyer to litigate it for him, went to the Supreme Court, and that decision created the entire, as we know it today, the entire public defender system. I think that while it's not exactly movement lawyering, I think that serves as an incredible example. Many times when community tells us this thing, right? Because all of us, if we went back in time to that moment and we were sitting in that courtroom, we would have been shaking our heads too. We said, no, we've read the cases. You don't get a lawyer unless you're charged with a capital crime. You don't get a criminal defense lawyer unless you're charged with a capital crime. That's what most people, the more aware you are of the law at that time, when Mr. Gideon was sentenced, when Mr. Gideon was tried, the more educated you were in the law, the more I would have said, you're wrong. The thing that you're arguing is wrong, and you shouldn't argue that because you're going to lose. That should be a mantra. It's like a Zen koan. That's a thing that we should keep in our minds, right? We actually would have harmed that situation. Lawyers harmed that situation, because if he wasn't such I want to say belligerent, but if he wasn't so tenacious, if he wasn't so steadfast, if he wasn't so resolute, if he wasn't so stubborn in his attitude to say, I deserve a lawyer, the public defender system that exists in this country right now, the right to counsel at its most dramatic level, I think, wouldn't exist.